Welcome to the Health on Track podcast. Let's talk well-being.
Welcome to the Health on Track podcast, offering you a shot of wellness. I'm Yasmin, Member Engagement and Communications Manager at GIG Gulf. The dieting space has evolved significantly over the past couple of years, and we're now more aware that the classic diet might not work as we'd like to think, and that eating in general is a more complex experience, that's simply cutting out carbs and sugar. We're now more aware of things like emotional eating and binge eating, and Natassia is at the forefront of those driving this change. I'm here today with Natassia D'Souza, emotional eating and sustainable weight loss expert, who went on an incredible weight loss journey herself and dropped 65 kgs or maybe more, driven by her unwavering mission to empower people to feel their emotions instead of feed them. Welcome to our podcast, Natassia.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me again. I'm excited to be back.
Absolutely. So what is binge eating?
Great question. And
Get right into it.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so glad we started off with that question, because so often you hear people say, "Oh, I binged," and it's not the same as binge eating. Binge eating is a disorder. It is a mental health disorder. It has been assigned as a mental health disorder about 5 to 7 years ago. And binge eating is when an individual eats large amounts of food in small periods of times. There's about 6 to 7 signs that indicate an individual is struggling with binge eating. They tend to want to eat alone. They tend to want to eat in secrecy. After eating those large amounts of food, they will tend to feel lots of guilt and shame. They are sometimes quite heavily stuck in a binge and restrict cycle, so large amounts of food and then go on to the next diet or the next means of restriction. A person struggling with binge eating can gain large amounts of weight in a very small period of time. You'll often see them fluctuating in weight on a weekly, monthly basis. So those are the signs, and that's what binge eating is.
So binge eating doesn't really have anything to do with hunger.
Absolutely not. So binge eating has nothing to do with hunger. It has nothing to do with willpower. It has nothing to do with, I really like that item and therefore I can't control myself around it. It has a lot to do with brain power and how we are associating ourselves and how we are dealing with the difficult emotions that we are experiencing. It has a lot to do with your nervous system regulation, how you've taught yourself to self-soothe, to cope with emotions. If an individual has taught themselves very early on, and this could be as early as the age of 8, taught yourself that food makes me feel better, that will then be your coping tool and can be an enhanced coping tool as you age going forward. Binge eating also doesn't have a size. So sometimes people think only individuals that struggle with weight struggle with binge eating. They're the higher percentages over there, but you could see I've worked with models that struggle with binge eating disorders. I've worked with dancers that struggle, bikini competitors that struggle with binge eating. So yeah, it doesn't have a shape or size, and that's often a misconception that gets thrown out when it comes to binge eating.
No, thank you for clarifying that. So how does binge eating differ from just emotional eating?
Binge eating they're both flow on a spectrum. Anyone can be an emotional eater. I believe we're all emotional eaters, right? And I said this on our last podcast together, that we could be emotional eating because we're celebrating a birthday. That's an emotion, and we're eating, and it's a graduation. We're going to a restaurant. A binge eater is going through extreme bouts of emotions and eating large amounts of food. So that's the biggest difference. Usually a binge eater experiences those large bouts of guilt and shame. An emotional eater can have an overeating episode, could emotionally eat and just move on with their day. Maybe they wanted to feel comforted with a soup or something of that sort. Completely different opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to emotional and binge eating.
So emotional eating, I guess it can be more common, more day to day. I had a stressful day, so I'm just treating myself with a nice, I don't know, chocolate or dessert or something. But binge eating can go for longer periods of time, and it happens more frequently.
Absolutely. So to give you a better example, emotional eating could be you know what, it's winter time and I just feel like I want to have something warm and just something cozy. It reminds me of my house when I was growing up. That's an emotion, right? And there's no coping there. There's nothing. It just reminds you of a nostalgic time
just
in your life.
comforting.
Exactly. Now, emotional eating can also go on a spectrum and can lead to weight gain, but you could start it off not for a reason that's making you feel uncomfortable. Binge eating, on the other hand, the amount of food varies, and it's usually you're coming from a place of anxiety, you're coming from a place of depression, sadness. The emotion is very strong, and you're trying to deal with that emotion. You're feeling super uncomfortable, and you're not able to express yourself, or you're not able to regulate yourself in that difficult emotion. So, in order to suppress further, you're eating large amounts of food. So, I hope that helps with the difference
Yeah.
between the two
So,
of them.
with binge eating, you're literally trying to bury your feelings with food.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Are there triggers to binge eating?
There can be. Emotional triggers tend to be a huge, huge trigger when it comes to binge eating, anxiety. It also could be environments, and it also can be people triggers. So I tend to be the busiest around Christmas, Easter time, because a lot of my clients are going home for the holidays, having to deal with.
Very stressful.
Exactly, right? So, because we live in a country where we're all filled with expat, people are going home. Sometimes the root of your binge eating triggers, unfortunately, can be family members, can be friends from back home. So, it can be environmental, emotional, and people triggers are the three that I ask people to be more aware of. Because when you're aware, you have opportunities to make better choices.
Yeah, makes sense. You mentioned that binge eating is a mental health disorder. Can it be cured, or do you just learn to manage it?
You can recover from binge eating. So I'm someone that struggled with binge eating right from the young age of 6. And I am at a place right now, I can still feel signs when I'm stressed where it tells me, go and have that pizza. You'll feel so much better. It usually tends to come up when I'm feeling overwhelmed or very stressed. But I'm in a position right now, I'm so self aware right now. I've done so much work on myself. I have done cognitive behavioral therapy. I know how to talk to myself better. That even though the signal comes up, I'm able to talk to myself now and tell myself, actually, you don't need that. Why are you feeling overwhelmed? So I wouldn't say it completely disappears. There are people out there that I'm sure will want to defy me and say, no, you can completely cure from binge eating. But coming from someone that truly struggles with binge eating and has had the disorder for majority of my life, I wouldn't say the voice disappears. You just get a remote control in your hand to turn the volume down.
Yeah. I guess it depends maybe on where you are on the spectrum. So maybe for you, you're able to control and just kind of mute that voice, but maybe for someone else who is like still on the not on the deep end of the spectrum, then they can cure it or like completely silence it.
Absolutely. I mean, the even though I can mute it, I still hear it.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have the right tools in place, because what tends to happen with an individual struggling with binge eating, they're looking for satisfaction immediately. And so in a world where we have social media, we have Noon, Kareem, Talabat delivered to our doors in 11 to 12 minutes. Right?
Amazon too now.
And Amazon as well. And so, how do we tell ourselves, I can feel satisfied, I will be okay, but it can be delayed? And so, having the proper tools of delayed gratification, delayed sense of well being, this is something that we need to learn in a world that's evolving to move things really fast. And if you don't have the right tools, this is where you could hear the voice and you won't be able to mute it. Even I have moments when I'm really stressed and I tell myself, chocolate bar right now would be really good. But then I just have to kind of step in and remind myself. And that's where an individual can go from struggling really hard with it to moving along the spectrum to a better place of dealing with it.
So what are some tools that you usually share with your clients that they're to help them control or at least just take a moment to think
Absolutely.
before, making the order and getting that extra cheese pizza?
Yeah. So I always tell individuals that when you're dealing with binge eating, when you're in the binge, so you're there and all the food's in front of you and you're in it, it's too late, right? It's too late. That's like taking food away from a lion. It's too late.
Don't do it.
Exactly. So if you've reached that point already, and it's happened, give yourself some grace, give yourself some compassion. There is no clear way to recovery. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to have some episodes. I know I've made some mistakes before getting to this side. I've seen my clients that have been binge free for months, even 6 months, and they'll be like, Natassia, I had a little mini episode. It happens. So giving yourself compassion there rather than restriction. So important. Because a binge eater, a person that's struggling with binge eating, tends to feel that if I restrict, it will solve the problem. If I start losing weight, it will solve the problem. It doesn't. Compassion does. Going back to regular eating does. Telling yourself you made a mistake and you can do better does. And I know it doesn't sound like the solution that an individual is used to, but it provides growth and you'll tend to see a difference immediately. Now, if we're looking at it from the other spectrum of things, where we're trying to handle it before it actually happens, this is where we're dealing with the urge to binge. So the urge to binge is a feeling that you feel. So that exact feeling I told you where I said, I could do with the chocolate right now, that's what we need to handle. Because if I've already ordered the chocolate's already in front of me, it's a little too late. But if I can tell myself, wait a minute, I've eaten. So the first thing I would ask the individual when they feel that urge, I need something right now. Have I eaten? Right? Is this an emotional hunger or is this physical hunger? Very important to be able to differentiate the two. If it's a physical hunger, then you could have a salad, you could have a banana, you could have a chicken wrap, and you would feel good. But if it's emotional, it would say, actually, yeah, I'm full, but I want that cookie right now. I want that muffin right now. It's very specific, it's very immediate. So already you know I'm dealing with an emotion here, right? And then it's time to introspect. So we go inside and we ask ourselves, why? Why do you need this? You ate, right? And I'm not saying I'm not saying chocolate is a bad thing or wanting a muffin is a bad thing. But if you're overdoing it and you're relying on it to feel better, especially when you're feeling that emotion of overwhelm or stress, it's important to question yourself. It's important to reparent yourself and tell yourself better things. And so questioning it and asking, well, what's going on here? So something I would do to myself is, oh, you want a chocolate bar? What happened? You ate? You know, what's going on here? And then I'll tell myself, oh, I'm stressed. I feel so stressed. So I actually reparent myself in that moment. Okay, you're stressed. Well, what are you stressed about? And the minute you start breaking down that task, the body, you'll notice your shoulders relax, you feel a bit more comfortable, and you start slowly notice, I just needed the food to make me feel better in that uncomfortable moment. Yeah. You'll see a lot of university students, I help a lot of university students before their exams, binge eating starts to skyrocket because they're all so tensed and they're telling themselves, oh, I just need to eat this pizza and then I can start studying, right? It's just a moment, it's just a way of handling the overwhelm that they're dealing with and in the exam period.
Yeah. I remember during studying, you really get the munchies.
Yeah.
Oh, I want some popcorn. I want some chips.
Yeah.
I just feel like I want to munch on something. I don't know.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the anxiety building, right? It's like I have to study and the exams tomorrow. Will I do good? There's so much around that. You know, you're taught in school you should do better, you should get high grades, you should do this. When have we been ever taught saying, you know, when during an exam period, there's a tendency of you feeling anxious, feeling nervous, fear of failure, perfectionism. How do you handle that? They don't teach. Exactly. They never teach this in school. And so people are then sent off to universities whereas, you know, university is very different from high school. I know I got a shocker when I went in. You head off into university and you're dealing with all these courses, all these professors, all these deadlines, then your exams, and you're learning how to cope and you're young. You know, you don't have access maybe to alcohol or drugs at that time. Food is the easiest access. And then you start learning how to cope and use it as a tool to survive.
And ironically, we are taught that drugs and alcohol are bad. We're not taught that food can be just as bad. No one speaks about binge eating or food addiction or.
Absolutely. Because we need food to survive, right? When it comes to drugs or alcohol,
Or smoking.
yes, or smoking, they can survive without it, right? They might have some withdrawal in the beginning, some shaking, some jitters, but they don't need it for their day-to-day life. Whereas with food, it can go from 0 to 100 very quickly. It's like, okay, I had a salad and now I ended up in a binge, right? And so this is why you need to education, awareness, threading carefully, knowing where you stand in all of this, so important.
There's a technique that I use with myself. I don't know if this is actually correct or not, but if I find myself like stressed that I'm craving a chocolate bar or something, I would replace it with a protein bar. So something that still gives me the sweet, that sugar hit that I'm craving, but it's a bit healthier.
Yeah, it's actually a great option, right? Because there's two ways of looking at this. We have people that struggle with binge eating and should not be addressing their weight loss issues until they address their binge eating. Then we have individuals that are trying to do better and be better because they have their binge eating in control, but they also want to be a healthier version of themselves for their health and well-being. I often tell people, if you're struggling with binge eating, that is the first thing that needs to get addressed, weight loss second. So the way you're explaining that scenario to me would be someone that says, you know what, I'm caring for my health and well-being. Chocolate would be 350 calories, no nutritional value. My protein bar will be 200 calories, 20 grams of protein will be keeping me fuller longer. So it's a different mentality of thinking. And often people need to come to that area to understand it better and learn to tell themselves, yeah, I can make the substitute and it's okay. Would I recommend that substitute to someone in the beginning where they're quite high and they're binging? No, because then immediately they'll think, oh, yes, I get to go into weight loss immediately. It fixes the problem, you know? So very important that we differentiate, that's something that I do, right? I give myself a sweet treat. 4 p.m. is my time. I need to have my warm milk. I need to have one chocolate bar. Some days it's a chocolate bar. Some days it's a protein bar. And that would be a good alternative as well to look at things.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying the difference that, it might not work for everyone. So just everyone should be aware of where exactly they are.
Absolutely.
Okay. Can you just tell us more about what a binge eating episode looks like? I mean, we touched base on that a bit on your introduction, but just so that if someone is going through that and they're not aware that they're binge eating, they know how to recognize the signs.
Absolutely. So binge eating episode can vary from person to person, but some of the main signs that you would look at is large amounts of food, okay? And I'm not talking 3 slices of pizza versus 1. I'm talking a full pizza, a dessert. We could look at adding cookies, donuts, biscuits to that. I mean, if I think about my binge eating days, and some people, especially social media, find this so ridiculous. And especially now when they're like, there's no way you could eat that. I didn't get to 145 kilos by eating broccoli. Like, that's just did not happen. I ate, and I ate a lot. I was capable of eating a full cake of 6 to 8 people in one sitting. And we tend to eat very fast because we know that if we eat slow, the food's going to last longer. We're going to have to savor, enjoy. Who wants to do that, right? Who wants to be mindful? So I tend to eat really fast, large amounts of food. You tend to eat in secrecy and private because you're very ashamed about your behavior, right? You don't want people to see. You tend to almost live like 2 lives. Outside to the world, you're a happy person, probably people pleasing left, right, and center. People think, wow, she's always has a smile on her face. Secretly, you're struggling a lot. And so those tend to be the big tendencies. You probably have food on your mind. So the day that I had my binge, I already knew by 2 p.m. at work that I was going to have a binge that day. And I would plan all the things, all the places I had to stop before I would go home to make that binge into an experience. And so those tend to be the common signs when I speak to individuals to see where they are. If they're an emotional eater, are they just an overeater? Is it just an obsession with food? Or are they struggling with binge eating? If what I've described is something that they can relate to or have done before, it's often a sign of binge eating.
Is binge eating usually related to anxiety and depression?
It can be a way of solving the anxiety and depression you are feeling. It's not always, because sometimes you speak to individuals when they're struggling with anxiety or depression, they go the other way. They just don't eat, right? So it can be a tool. It depends on at what point you have felt that emotion in your body and realized it made me feel better. And then the brain remembers, the body remembers. So the next time you feel even a hint of anxiety, you feel even a hint of overwhelm, if you feel a hint of sadness, right? It will trigger that it's your body's way of survival. Your body wants you to feel better. And I often tell people, when you feel that urge coming up, something in your life is not right.
Yeah.
And you need to start doing a check. What is it? Did you have an argument? Is something making you feel unsettled? And 9 times out of 10, when I have those conversations with people, you'll hear like, oh, someone said something, or I should have done this way, or this bothered me. And they probably handled it in the past through suppression. And now it's coming to the surface. And you are then having to face a new side of you. In the past, you would make yourself feel better with food. Now you're being tested if you don't want to binge to speak up, to do something about it. And that can often be quite scary for people if they've never done that in the past.
Yeah. Do you find that sometimes people, they don't want to accept that they are binge eaters? Like they're in denial, like, no, 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 this is not me. I'm just enjoying the food. I just really felt like I wanted to eat that cake.
Absolutely. I tend to say it quite often, actually. And this mainly happens for two reasons. One reason being, you, yeah, right. And you just enjoy the binge eating experience. People don't like when I say this, but it's the truth. And I have confronted many clients and say, you don't want to give up your binge eating because you like it. You like having those episodes where you're sitting there with large amounts of food, enjoying it, picking everything that you like, having no control, discipline in that moment. You like it. And often the response will be, how could you say that, Natassia? If I liked it, I would not sit here in front of you. And I said, it's okay to like it. I liked it too. I liked the fact that I could go and order whatever I wanted and just eat. But what I didn't like was the aftermath. And the more honest we can be about ourselves in regards to that, the better we'll be able to work with it. You know, if we're pretending like we are these two different people at all times, that's when you tell yourself, that's not me. That's not who I am. But the more you can own it and say, yeah, it is me. And I think I do like it. Because the other fear that people have, especially when they're trying to fix binge eating, is that all the food will get taken away from them. So, and this is why they go into restriction. But the truth of the matter is that if you approach this very differently and the food doesn't get taken away from you and you still get to enjoy the chocolate and the cookies, but not 10 a day, maybe 2 a day, every single day, isn't that a good concept? And so that's just it's a classic way of looking at cognitive behavioral therapy for this, allowing the individual to see that it's not getting taken away from them. Actually, they get to practice and get to include this in their life on a daily basis and giving it a really different perspective. And so once they can get those skills, then the fear of giving up binge eating tends to die down. But until then, I have seen many episodes where people won't acknowledge it. They know they're struggling, but they won't acknowledge it entirely.
Yeah, makes sense. You mentioned that you struggled with binge eating when you were 6 years old.
Yeah.
How can we teach children to have a healthy relationship with food? Actually, not just children, adults, but I say children because, you know, as an adult, it's harder to change.
Yeah.
But how can we just have a healthier relationship with food?
Such a great question, and thank you so much for asking that. The important thing to really understand and note here for children in particular, because I have seen and also worked with children that struggle with food obsession quite early on in their life, is for parents to encourage more communication. Right? If your child is struggling with food or struggling with their weight, or you're seeing them wanting and needing food a lot more than usual, it's to communicate with them. You know, are you hungry? What's happening? The kid could have a fast metabolism. You know, it's not, we shouldn't be assuming that immediately the child is struggling with food or things of that sort. They could be enrolled in a lot of sports. They could be things of that sort. But if your child is maybe struggling with their weight, maybe relying on food as early as 6, 7, 8, it's important to have that communication. I wish I did. I was struggling emotionally as a child at 6 years old, and I wish I had the tools I have right now, where my parents did their best. It's just no one was able to think in that way of asking, are you struggling right now, right? And I believe communication and really getting down to that child's level and seeing what they could possibly face, or even bringing a therapist or a professional on board to have them open up, would be so beneficial for them to do better and eat better, and bring that awareness really early on as a child.
Do you think things like you have to finish your plate and no, you have to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner and all, do you think that kind of supports binge eating behavior?
I don't believe it supports binge eating. I believe it supports emotional eating, right? Because an individual can come from a great environment, not gone to any traumas, never used food to cope, never gone on the binge eating disorder perspective of things, but does have an emotional attachment to food. Sometimes I'll work with individuals. They're not binge eaters per se. They just overdo it every so often. And if I ask them why, they're like, Natassia, my mom never allowed me to get up from the table until I finished my plate. She said there were starving kids around the world. I had to finish. Like, so now, even if I'm full, I need to force myself to eat it.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't believe it can be one or the other. And when it comes to breakfast, lunch, dinner, I don't think that encourages it either, only because the structure is important. If you see an individual struggling with food, they tend to lack structure and routine in their eating habits. So I believe those aspects of things were actually beneficial. We've just, as we've grown up as adults, taken what's worked for us, had late nights at university, late nights at work, and said, I'll skip a meal here, I'll do this here, to buy back time, and buy back time the wrong way, and then hence leading us to rely on food for support.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I know someone who her son wasn't eating much. And so when she went to a doctor and she was like, he's not eating, and he's like, leave him. The doctor said, he said, leave him. Nobody dies of hunger. And if he's hungry, he'll eat. But if you force him to eat and say, no, you have to eat or you have to finish your plate, that just isn't building a healthy relationship. And he doesn't know how to make decisions or understand his body. Like, I'm hungry, so I'm going to eat. I'm full, so I'll stop eating. But if you just let him make the decision himself, then you're training him for that later on.
Yeah, it's like self-regulation,
Yeah.
right? And it tends to work a little bit differently on the opposite spectrum of things. So in the opposite spectrum, if individuals struggling with anorexia and not eating, it is important to let them build that hunger themselves. But again, communication, right? Why is the child choosing not to eat? I have a sister, but growing up, my sister was, she just didn't eat. She was just a very active child. But when she sat down to eat, when she was finally hungry, she ate. And she, 2, 3 plates, but she was fine. But she was just a very active child. So completely agree with the doctor there. But I would also add communication to that, just in case the child doesn't get attached to that feeling of, oh, I didn't eat for a long time, and that makes me feel good, because it can give them a sense of control if other things in their life are feeling a little bit haywire.
Yeah. Okay. So communication and balance, I'd say.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. Any other tips you'd like to add?
Tips I'd like to add is, so we talked about emotional hunger, physical hunger. We've talked about the urge to binge. We've talked about compassion after an individual struggles with binge eating. I would also say, know that people are coming out more and talking about binge eating now. There are more individuals struggling than you can imagine. This is no longer just put down or based to willpower, or you just need to lose weight. So know that you're not alone. Know that there is support out there. See if that's something you're struggling with and get the proper help, instead of just putting yourself on the next diet to think it will solve the problem. This is the other issue that I tend to have with weight loss injections. I love it as a tool. It's so amazing. But if you're struggling with binge eating, it doesn't fix the problem, right? And it tends to come back. So those are the tips that I would definitely recommend to people.
Okay. Amazing. Thank you so much, Natassia. As usual, this has been great.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in and hope you got some beneficial takeaways. Please share this episode with your social circle so they can also benefit. We're available on YouTube Video and Music, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Rami and Amazon Music. Until next time, stay well and keep thriving.